And last, we have the neutrals. First neutral card is Two-Faced Investor, a 3-cost 2/4. At the end of your turn, reduce the cost of your card, a card in your hand by 1. 50% chance to increase. So this, I'm fairly certain, is it could either reduce it or increase it. I saw some discussion on like social media of, oh, does this have a 50% chance to increase it, to reduce it by more, increase the reduction? That's not what it means. It's either -1 or +1, whichever way. Which I think this card's just pretty bad. I think it's kind of funny. It's like, an ogre, the ogre design on like, a cost reduction mechanic. Kind of neat, but I don't think this card is good. I don't think this card is going to see play. I think it's just going to be a meme. Next up, we have Auctioneer Jackson. 2-cost 2/3. Whenever you trade, discover a card from your deck to draw instead. I think this card's actually kind of interesting. You could play, like, I think a lot of the tradable cards, as I've discussed, I think are pretty solid. And using, effectively turning tradable cards into cycle for a discover, and at worst, you can like get, another tradable card very often. You can discover another tradable card and then discover again. I think it's cool. And it comes in the body of a 2-cost 2/3. I don't think this is a card that you're not building your deck around this, right? You're not like, oh, my deck is all about Auctioneer Jackson. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe there's some weird tradable deck that's a bunch of combos, and you piece things together. Maybe this just allows you to churn through your deck and discover the perfect cards. But I think this is a really interesting card that gives you some selectivity at a very low cost. And I think that so many of the tradable cards are already pretty good that, if you're playing a deck that includes like a significant number of them, this might just be a reasonable card to put into your deck. Next up is Lady Prestor, who it turns out is the free card for this expansion. Everyone gets a Lady Prestor from, I believe, the reward track. 6-cost 6/7. Battlecry. Transform minions in your deck into random dragons. They keep their original stats and costs. So this is kind of a weird card, right? Because it turns a bunch of the cards in your deck into dragons, but they're disguised dragons, like Lady Prestor. She's disguised. She's actually a Nixia. Who's been, infiltrating Stormwind, and she turns all your other dragons into disguised dragons. So you can get like, a 2-cost minion that's turned into a Malagos or an Alexstrasza or a Ysera that gives you all the battlecry effects of those. I think this card is hilarious. I think it's super cool. I don't think there's like a consistent way to like abuse this, right? Like, I feel like you need things that would like draw. You maybe want this in a deck with like just a ton of cheap minions, right? Maybe you're playing this in like a paladin deck that has a ton of 1-drops, and then you have like, a bunch of ways to draw those minions from your deck, which there really aren't that many. There's like the Bannerman or whatever. You want a bunch of ways to draw the minions after you have played Lady Prestor, and then hopefully get a bunch of really powerful cheap battle cries like Alexstrasza's. But yeah, I think she's just super cool. Like, I'm definitely going to try decks with her because she's super cool and hilarious. I doubt she's, like, going to be, again, like, I doubt she's going to be, like, a particularly good card, but she's going to be an awesome card, and that's what I care about. Next up is Impatient Shopkeep. 3/3 Tradable Rush. It's one of the least interesting of the tradable cards. Like, a 3/3 Rush is just, like, a card that is, like, generally applicable. Like, I feel like the tradable cards are mostly cards that are like, oh, this is situationally powerful. This is just like, a 3/3 Rush is just, eh. So, I don't think this card is particularly interesting or particularly powerful. It's fine, but meh. Next up, we have Rust Rot Viper. Now, this is the perfect tradable card. A 3-cost 3/4 beast. Battlecry. Destroy your opponent's weapon. So weapon removal is always like a hot topic, right? The number of every time you lose like a Doomhammer deck, people are like, you should play Ooze in your deck. It's like the refrain that 100% comes from Twitch chat. Every single time you die to a weapon, people are like, you should play Ooze. Well, Ooze is now in shambles because Rust Rot Viper is a card you can actually just play in pretty much every deck. Like, any deck that remotely cares about Doomhammer can play Rust Rot Viper. And when your opponent's playing a deck with Doomhammer, you don't trade it. If they aren't playing a deck with Doomhammer, you trade it. I just think this card's great. I think this card's going to see tons of play. I think it is largely going to replace Ooze. Maybe in metagames that have enough weapons, maybe you play Ooze and this. Or maybe you play Oozes because you want the 3/2 for 2 for tempo when you don't actually kill, a weapon with it. But yeah, I think this card is fantastic. Super, super good. Great against any kind of weapon deck. and like, just going to see tons of play. I think this is actually the existence of this card and the prominence of this card is probably going to significantly reduce the number of weapon focused decks in the metagame, simply because it's so easy to include. It's such a low cost to put this in your deck, unless you're playing some sort of like crazy combo deck. You have access to this, and it can absolutely swing matchup by just having a single weapon removal, and it's such a low cost to have in your deck because it's tradable. Next up, we have Varian, King of Stormwind. 8 cost 7/7. Battlecry, draw. Rush minion to gain rush. Repeat for taunt and divine shield. This card is awesome. Like, this card is really, really, really good. I played this as the top end of my hand buff paladin, and every time I drew it, it was insane. It was a draw 3 for a rush, taunt, divine shield. Obviously, that's going to be like the place where it's the best, right? Because you have a bunch of divine shield, you have a bunch of taunt, and you have a decent amount of rush in your deck. If you're playing a deck that like has like a divine shield, like it's like a lot like the what was it, Corpse Taker before. You only had like one divine shield or one Wind Fury minion or whatever with your Corpse Taker. You drew it. Your Corpse Taker was so much weaker. But yeah, this I think this card is awesome in Paladin. Probably able to be like pretty solid in like Warrior. Any deck that wants card draw and is like heavily minion focused that has access to these keywords, at its best in Paladin for sure, because you have much better access to Divine Shield than everyone else. Bare minimum, though, other decks can at least play Talon, right? And they can have access to the Divine Shield. And if you have already drawn your Talon, maybe your Talon drew your Varian, and then your Varian draws you, more stuff. But yeah, this is just very, very solid. Going to show up in a ton of decks. There's a diamond version of him that's super cool looking. Great card. Going to see tons of play. Next up, we have Pandaren Importer. Theme of cards that I think will see a good amount of play. 2 cost 1/3. Battlecry, discover a spell that didn't start in your deck. So this is, I think, a very interesting form of Discover. It's actually the way that a lot of people were arguing prior to the nerfs to Priest that Discover should work. You can't just discover more copies of things you already have. And I think this card actually has some cool implications for deck building, too. Being able to discover certain things, like, for instance, I think that this is a very interesting card in the Shadow Priest deck that I was playing. Because the Shadow Priest deck that I was playing, like, it's like, okay, well, you can't play holy spells. You can only play shadow spells. Well, my Pandaren Importer can get me the holy spells that heal me up. This can get you, like, situational things, right? Like, I don't know necessarily what class would want it other than Priest. Priest is the one that jumps at the most because they also still have like Raised Dead and stuff, so they get additional value out of the resource generation. But at least like you're not going to have your Pandaren Importer getting you more Raised Deads when you Raised Dead it back if you put Raised Dead in your deck. Maybe you play this in like Shaman because you have like nature spells, right? You're playing all nature spells, or you play this in Mage, right? You're playing like a Frost Mage deck or Fire Mage deck. You want to focus on those. Get you access to the stuff that you wouldn't otherwise have access to. So I think it's just a cool card. It's just a very, very interesting card, and I do expect to see a decent amount of play. I don't know if it's like as appealing. Like, do you play this instead of like Wand Maker in a lot of decks, right? I think in many decks you're just looking to play Wand Maker. I think in like in like specifically the Shadow Priest deck, I liked this because it gave me access to holy spells to allow me to heal, which were something that I otherwise wouldn't have access to. So it's cool. You can definitely do a lot of stuff with this. Maybe you play this with the Shaman Legendary. You just keep keep playing other battle cries and keep generating more spells in your deck. Boom, boom, boom. Value. Next up, we have Moarg Forge Fiend. 8 cost 8/8 demon with taunt and death rattle, gain 8 armor. This feels like it's the sort of thing that maybe this goes into big demon hunter or big demon warlock. It's something that gives you significant survivability in either of them. Big taunt, death rattle, gain armor, pretty solid. Maybe this goes into like some form of death rattle rogue with what was it? There's the thing that makes your guys cost 1. I think that guy went away, right? Anka the Buried. I think that guy's no longer around, right? Either way, this can go like big warrior maybe. This can go into the demon that can go into like a N'Zoth deck. And, like you don't have very many demons in a lot of them. This could be a defensive demon in those. But like Archwitch Willow decks, I've played like quite a few of those. This is maybe an inclusion in those. There's a lot of stuff that this can do. So I think this is for a vanilla card, like a close to vanilla card. Obviously, Death Rattle, gain 8 armor is not vanilla. I think this has more wide-reaching implications than one might expect. Next up is Entrapped Sorceress. 3 cost 3/4. Battlecry, if you control a quest, discover a spell. It's kind of like the Questing Adventurer of the set. Questing Adventurer, or Questing Explorer, rather. Questing Explorer, the 2 cost 2/3, draw a card if you have a quest. This is, if you have a quest, if you control a quest, discover a spell. So general all-purpose value tool in a lot of those decks that is a very, very solid body. And much like Questing Explorer, a lot of quest decks don't necessarily want it because they want to be using their mana to play their stuff. Like, you're not going to want this in, like, Paladin Quest, right? The Paladin Quest, you want to be playing 1-cost things. You're not doing anything to advance your quest. Maybe this goes into, like, I think this is, like, pretty appealing in, like, Shaman, right? There's a lot of good spells that, either have Overload or can help you do stuff to get more Overload cards, or you just get, utility things that don't have Overload. This can be potentially good in, like, Priest, right? This is, maybe your 3-drop for your Priest quest that you can discover something which maybe fills a hole in that curve of yours, or possibly, just general utility because Priest loves discovering spells. But yeah, just a solid card. I think it'll see a lot of play across a lot of the different quest decks. Next up, we have Mailbox Dancer. I really do appreciate the reference. People always used to dance on the mailboxes in Stormwind and Ironforge, of course. But this is a Stormwind set, so Battlecry, add a coin to your hand. Death Threat will give your opponent one. I don't know if the actual effect is really any good, but it's cool flavor. Maybe you're playing a deck that just really wants to specifically accelerate to something, or really cares about having the coin for spell synergies or something like that. But my guess is this isn't a good card, and it's just a funny reference. Next up is Spice Bread Baker. 4 cost 3/2 Battlecry. Restore health to your hero equal to your hand size. Definitely a handlock power card, right? Could be something that can help heal in a lot of classes that don't have access to it. Controlling mage decks can love this card. I played this a little bit in my fire combo mage deck. I think it was a little weak there, because the deck cared more about just sort of cycling through everything, and was probably better off just playing Ice Barrier or whatever. But I think this is just a very, very good card for any deck that has a significant amount of card draw and doesn't have really significant access to healing. There's not that many good neutral healing cards right now. Like Dungar is one good one that also came from this set. But yeah, this with Raised Dead and Warlock maybe. Lots of utility things that can keep you alive. Very good card, I think, in the Quest Warlock decks in particular that are likely to be, drawing a bunch of cards, damaging themselves, really want to get their life back up. So I expect this card to see a lot of play, especially in Warlock, but potentially in Mage as well, and maybe some other places. Next up, we have Traveling Merchant, a tradable card. 3 cost 2/3, Battlecry, gain +1/+1 for each other friendly minion you control. Meh. Maybe this is like a zoo card. This. Obviously, I do think that this is a card that, I like the fact that it's tradable. This is a sort of card that easily rots in your hand when your opponent is playing a control deck and it's clearing your board state. It can be very powerful, right? This is can be huge if you have a big board, whether you're playing a zoo type deck, whether you're playing fill your board hunter or something like that. It can be very, very impactful. But and the fact that it's tradable, does mean that you don't really have the downside of, oh, this is sitting in my hand, all my dudes are dead. I don't know if those are decks that are likely to be effective or popular, but it is a very, very big threat that can potentially come down very early in the game if you fill the board with tiny demons or with Kolkar Pack Runner, right? You just Kolkar Pack Runner into coin wound prey into this guy. Suddenly, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. You've a 6 power minion for 3 mana or whatever. I guess that's not quite right. It is. Yeah, it is right. 6 power minion for 3 mana on turn 3. Not bad. Or just Wolpertinger turn 1 into another thing into this. It's just very, very powerful if you are able to stick a board, and if you're not, you trade it back in. Next up is Flightmaster Dungar. This is the card we got for free with the announcement. Cool card, I think everyone has seen it by now. This card actually was significantly better than I expected it to be. The big thing that I like about this card is the Ironforge path. The fact that it gives healing to classes that don't necessarily otherwise have healing. I've really liked the in 3 turns heal 10 in a lot of my controlling decks that don't necessarily have access to healing. Those mostly being Warlock and Mage. Next up, we have Royal Librarian, a tradable 3/4 for 4 Battlecry, silence a minion. Spellbreaker's gone, and now this guy's here, and this guy's much better than Spellbreaker. One of the ways that a lot of decks, that did include Spellbreaker would, end up being punished for it was that they would draw their Spellbreakers in matchups where Spellbreaker was bad. This guy, worst case scenario, put it back in your deck. Go get a new book. New book, not a librarian. New book is like, threat, removal spell, whatever. But yeah, I think this is very, very good. I think that Royal Librarian is, it's the silence equivalent of the Rot Snake or whatever, right? Like in a metagame where there's any popular decks that you want to silence stuff, you have the option of including at least one of this card. Is Libram Paladin popular? Okay, well, Royal Librarians come and answer. I do think that like there are at least like more sort of ways to deal with that sort of thing than like weapon removal. So this is less likely to be as popular as the Rot Snake. But if there is like a rise in like Libram Paladin or whatever, having this guy around, or like if there's like Rattlegores or whatever around, this guy can be a really, really good answer to that. Next we have Stormwind Guard, 4/5 taunt. Battlecry, give adjacent minions +1/+1. Meh. Seems like he's probably a little bit too inefficient, even in like a Zoo style deck, to likely be that powerful. He is a okay body by himself. He's basically like, he doesn't give it adjacent minions taunt, so he's not quite like a big defender Vargas or anything, but he's, I think like mid-range-ish Zoo, he's fine. Like a Fungal Mancer that's better on an empty board, or, something like that. So I think he's a fine card. I think that like the most likely place that you're looking for an effect like this does tend to be like a Zoo style deck, and I think that the guy who pumps demons +2/+2 is likely to be significantly stronger, so I don't really expect this guy to really see a lot of play. Next up is Deep Run Engineer. Battlecry, discover a mech, it costs 1 less. It's kind of a weird card. It's maybe good, maybe good-ish. It's not. If this was like Battlecry, discover mech, the next mech you play costs 1 less, like a studies effect. I think this maybe would be like a good card because you could actually play it with like actual mechs in your deck and have it matter, but doesn't really seem that effective to me. Next up, we have Lion's Guard. You have 15 or less health, gain +2/+4, and taunt. Doesn't seem like it's amazing. If it had baseline taunt and gain +2/+4, then this card would be quite good, probably. But no, just being baseline of a 4/6. We did see like there was the 4/4 that became like a 7/7 taunt or an 8/8 taunt that was really good in Even Warlock, but this is not Even Warlock. We don't have the discounted hero power or whatever to keep tapping and then play things really efficiently. So if this does see play, I expect it will be in Warlock. But and if it's turned on, right, this is a 6/10 taunt for 5. That's pretty big, right? And if this is activated, maybe you're playing the Quest Warlock or something. Maybe this is better than some form of removal against certain decks, depending on what they have access to. The problem is a lot of the aggressive decks, tend to have either stuff that goes face, either a lot of stuff that goes face, like Face Hunter, or they have access to like. I guess they don't really play like sap stuff anymore, right? If you look at the current rogue type decks, but they're mostly like they end with face damage too. So I don't really expect to see play, but again, if it does, it's gonna be in Warlock. Next up is Stockades Guard, aka Sun Fury Protector 1. He only protects 1 person. But it's a 1/3 for 1. 1/3 for 1 is actually like maybe this is actually like something you play in like a Zoo deck, right? I don't know, like 1/3 for 1 that can like you can give something like it could be like a totally big decent like early play, not really great, but it can be an early play. Maybe you have ways to buff it. Then maybe you can like give other things taunt to protect your like key minions later. I think it's fine. I don't think this is like an all-star, but I could see like maybe this goes into like the Dude Paladin deck, right? It's just like a 1-cost guy that helps you enable your quest and can like somehow I don't know what you're really looking to protect, other than your face. Maybe you have like Divine Shield minions you give taunt to, because you have like a bunch of Argent Squires and stuff. Not sure. where this goes, but it doesn't seem bad. It at least seems like maybe this is a card that can see. This is Guild Trader. 4 cost 3/4 tradable, spell damage +2. We've come so far since Evolved Kobold, right? You used to be able to get Evolved Kobold. It was 4 mana 2/2 with spell damage +2. Now that there's not like, Emperor Thaurissan Frostbolt Ice Lance, you can do a lot better. You can get spell damage +2 on a tradable 3/4 for 4. But yeah, I mean, I there's a lot of good spell damage cards these days, especially within the classes that use spell damage a lot, like Mage and Shaman. One of the interesting things is that this can show up on Primordial Studies and then get traded into your deck if you really don't want a spell damage minion. It's kind of like a weird corner case, but not something that is irrelevant and something that can definitely come up in some games. Next up is SI7 Skulker, 2/2 stealth, battlecry. The next card you draw costs 1 less. Obviously a card that goes into the SI7 quest deck. I could see this maybe being a card that goes into the field contact decks, just because, it's a battlecry effect that sets up for your field contact type turns. The cost reduction is pretty relevant, and, maybe just the 2/2 stealth body is relevant as well. So I think this is just a decent solid card. Probably not like, a frequent go-to, but definitely has some homes. Next up is Encumbered Pack Mule. I think this card's really interesting. It's a 2/3 taunt for 2. When you draw it, add a copy to your hand. So this is, I think, interesting in like hand lock. You care about how many cards you have in your hand. You want to get copies, make more cards in your hand. I also kind of like this in like hand buff paladin because, getting the buffs on multiple things can be valuable. Also possibly valuable in like a beast druid deck because it is a beast. And, giving you multiple copies of it, and, the 2/3 taunt, you could potentially even play this in, like, Taunt Beast Druid, right? You can play your Razor Mane and get, this guy into play, and then have another one for free next turn. So I actually think it's just, like, there's a lot of, elements to this that make it potentially appealing in a variety of different, like, kind of niche decks, but I think it could be solid in all 3 of those. Next up, Stubborn Suspect. 4 cost 3/3, Death Rattle, summon a random 3-drop. Meh. I mean, this is like kind of Piloted Shredder-ish. It's a little bit lower impact. Summoning a 3-cost minion is obviously better than summoning a 2-cost minion, though. So maybe this ends up seeing play in like sort of those Death Rattle Rogue type decks. Piloted Shredder has also like been fairly outclassed by the sort of stuff that we have these days. So I don't think this is going to be nearly as ubiquitous as Piloted Shredder because there's a lot more like good stuff to play. But I think this is potentially a decent card for Death Rattle decks in particular. Next up is Cornelius Rome. Start at end of each player's turn, draw a card. It's sort of weird that this isn't at the start and end of your turn, draw 2 cards. It's exactly how it still plays out, other than like things that trigger on each turn. It just feels a little bit more confusing the way that it's worded. But I think this card is just an excellent card draw tool for classes or decks that kind of lack card draw. I think that people are kind of overrating it a little bit because it is a 6-cost 4/5. 6-cost 4/5 basically draw 2 cards. If opponent doesn't kill it, you keep drawing more. It is not a mill card. I've seen people say, "Oh, that it's going to overdraw your opponent." It does not make your opponent draw any cards. It makes you draw all the cards. It's the start and end of each player's turn. You draw a card. That's part of why I think that like the other wording of at the start and end of your turn, draw 2 cards, would make it like more clear what it does. But I like this in like hand buff paladin. I think this potentially be good in like maybe hunter, right? It's a body. But like hunter's weird, right? Like because maybe you really want to draw cards in hunter, but you don't want to spend 6 mana and just play a 4/5. You care a lot about the tempo you're getting too. So it's interesting. But I do like the fact that like a relatively powerful card draw effect is available to anyone who wants it. Next up, we have Package Runner. 3 cost 5/6, can only attack if you have at least 8 cards in hand. Obviously, hand lock style card. It's also can be used with the Stockades Guard, like old Ancient Watcher plus Sun Fury. You got your overcosted, or rather overstatted, undercosted guy. Boom, give it taunt. Get through that, buddy. But more than anything, I think this is, handlock type card. Draw your cards and get them. Next up is Nobleman. 3 cost 2/3, Battlecry, create a golden copy of random card in your hand. I mostly just think this is funny. Kind of like the Zola that made the golden card. This is a random one in your hand. Probably not nearly as effective as a combo card as Zola is, but yeah, he's cool. He's funny. Don't think he's good. Next up is Florist. The end of turn, reduce the cost of a nature spell in your hand by 1. Pretty interesting card. I think this is more likely to be good in Shaman. Well, I guess both Shaman and Druid play 0 cost things. I'm curious if this can hit a 0 cost thing. I know that there are there are stuff like the what was it? Blood Dude, the Priest's card. It couldn't reduce, got changed to not be able to reduce things that were already 0. This eventually, hitting like Lightning Bloom would be a lot worse. But this is just a strong card. Totally reasonable body. Drop this in turn 2. You already get a discount, and then you potentially get more of them as the game progresses. Obviously, like a lot of decks that are heavy on nature spells don't necessarily want a 2/3 for 2. But like if you're playing, you could even play this like in a a deck that's playing like Overgrowth, Wild Growth type stuff, right? And you mostly have those sort of if you also have those sort of ramp spells in your hand and not like a bunch of other nature spells. Say the only nature spells in your deck are like ramp spells or like big spells like Arbor Up, right? You care about the Arbor Up getting reduced because of the body. You care about the ramp spell getting reduced because now your ramp is cheaper, and your Florist can get buffed by your Arbor Up, and you ramp out whatever. I don't know. I just think this is any time that you see something that has cost reduction, it is worth paying attention to. That has cost reduction that is potentially repeatable if your opponent doesn't remove it. So I think this is a card that is worth keeping an eye on. Next up is City Architect. 6 cost, 4/4 Battlecry, summon 2/0/5 Walls with Taunt. Probably not very good. Probably more of an arena card than anything. Unless this could be in like a deck with Arbor Up or whatever, but otherwise, meh. Okay, next up is Elwyn Boar. This is the true glorious meme card of the expansion. Death Rattle, you had 7 Elwyn Boars die this game. Equip a 15/3 Sword of 1,000 Truths. So this is a reference. If you haven't seen it, you absolutely need to watch the Make Love Not Warcraft episode of South Park. It is a true classic. But yeah, the Sword of 1,000 Truths, entrusted to a noob. If you haven't actually seen the Sword of 1,000 Truths, I'm not going to dig it up right now. It is 15/3. When you attack, destroy all your opponent's mana crystals. So if you get this off, you kind of win. It is very, very difficult to lose if you manage to not be dead and get this online. However, getting this online is not that easy. I think that the class that has the highest chance of being able to do it is Hunter, because of stuff like Dire Frenzy, Selective Breeder. You can do your best to Elwyn Boar. I'm sure that that's a deck that I will build. But Hunter's not very good at keeping itself alive when it's spending all its mana doing stuff like that. So yeah, very cool card. Gonna lead to some hilarious memes. Great cultural reference to one of the most fantastic pieces of modern parody that we have seen. Beautiful, perfect. I love it. So we have Enthusiastic Banker. 3 cost 2/3 at the end of your turn. Store a card from your deck. Death Rattle, add the stored card to your hand. Worth noting, your opponent sees the cards. This card was played against me during the Theory Crafting stream, and each player sees what the cards are. So if your opponent does have a silence effect, and they see something they really want to get rid of, they can silence it, kill this, and that card is gone forever because it's stored in the bank. So I do think this card is interesting. When I first saw this card, I thought it was a 2/3 for 2, and I was like, oh my god, this card is amazing. As a 2/3 for 3, I'm less excited because it's almost only ever going to get 1 card. But it's at least getting you a card from your deck. And if your opponent can't kill it, it can potentially get you more of them. But again, it is vulnerable if there are popular silence effects that you could lose key cards if they do get put under the banker. Next up is Cheesemonger. A 4 cost 3/6 whenever your opponent casts a spell at a random spell at the same cost to your hand. This card is actually pretty interesting. A 4 cost 3/6 is actually like a totally reasonable stat line. It's obviously not like ultra amazing, but it's solid for something which is difficult for your opponent to deal with without giving you value. If your opponent doesn't already have a board, Cheesemonger can definitely give you significant value as they spend spells trying to kill it or trying to advance their own board. It's not quite Ogremancer, but it's different than Ogremancer, because the Ogremancer, like if your opponent has a removal spell, just play a bunch of spells and then kill your 2/2s, right? With Cheesemonger, you just generate value if they're playing spells, and there's no like easy out to them for them, like just killing it, right? So I think this card's actually kind of quietly quite good. In a spell heavy metagame, I think this is a card that can actually do a lot of work and can, create some weird situations because it is random spells from any class, not your class, not necessarily their class. And yeah, if they kill it, it's not after, it's whenever. So if they cast a spell to kill it, you'll get a spell there. So yeah, I think this card is one of the sort of sleeperish cards of the set that I expect to be to see a decent amount of play and be better than it looks. Next up is Northshire Farmer. Battlecry, choose a friendly beast, summon 3/3 copies into your deck. So, obviously, anyone can do the boar thing. Anyone can just be a kind farmer, just tending to their boars. Play a boar, put 3 boars in their deck. Play a boar, put 3 boars in your deck. You got at least 7 boars. You can do it. So it's possible. You don't have to be a hunter. There are ways for everyone to get the sort of 1,000 truths. Honest work. Got to farm up those boars. And you get yourself your sword. And then, but only then, can you conquer he who has no life. Next up we have Battleground Battlemaster. I wonder if this guy's going to be in Battlegrounds. Or Gal is going to be in Battlegrounds. Adjacent minions have Wind Fury. This card seems pretty interesting. Any deck that has just like big dudes, like big minions, you can just blow someone up. Granted, you could already do that in Shaman, but this allows you to do this in, A, it hits multiple things, and B, it can go of any class. So, you can, like, buff stuff. You have, like, Rogue that makes a giant stealth guy. Boom, kills you. I don't think it's, like, likely to be great, but this is like, a neutral card that usually when you're going through the neutrals, a bunch of stuff, it's like, yeah, maybe not, especially like neutral commons. This one, though, it's like, maybe. Next up is Stockade Prisoner. 2 cost 5/4, starts dormant after you play 3 cards, this awakens. I feel like if you're playing, like maybe this could actually be like pretty interesting, like Rogue. Rogue has a lot of ability to play a bunch of cheap stuff, with like Octobot and Secret Passage and all this stuff. You just, boom, you get out a very quick 5/4. Be very difficult for people to deal with. Obviously, it can also just sit there, stuck in the prison. But yeah, so I think this is an interesting card. I think that like in like decks that have cheap card draw ways to play a lot of stuff, generate a lot of additional cheap resources. Like maybe you play like, I don't know, Aggro Mage. You play this, you like hot streak into first flame, second flame, boom, 5/4 turn 2, getcha. Yeah, maybe you're playing a deck that generates coins, right? There's a lot of stuff that you can do to get a quick 5/4. Maybe it's not worth it. Maybe, there's too many games where you draw this later on and you just don't have 3 cards to play. But I definitely think it's worth experimenting with in especially Rogue. Next we have Peasant. 1 cost 2/1. Start your turn, draw a card. I feel like maybe you see this in like Quest Paladin and not really anywhere else. There's just too many hero powers that kill this. And they kill it too easily. Maybe it's good. Maybe it's okay. But I just don't know who wants it, right? Maybe play this in Hand Buff Paladin. Maybe play this in Hand Buff Paladin, like, going first against people who, like, against like a priest or a warlock, boom, Peasant. And against other classes, maybe you hand buff it up and it can draw you stuff. But it's just very easy to kill. It's so easy to kill, right? Demon Hunter just punches it. Rogue or Mage just like punch kill it. Druid. I don't know. But like if it is something that's like, okay, it's a 1-drop that they feel compelled that they have to kill, that's also like, you don't get that from a 1-drop, right? Like just because they can kill it and, just use it with a hero power or whatever, if they have to like coin to kill it, that's using their coin to deal with your 1-drop, right? So I don't think this is like a standout by any means, but I think saying like, oh, it dies to a hero power against anything but Demon Hunter, right? Demon Hunter just hero powering it on 1 is awful, right? But I mean, how good are most 1-drops, right? Like any 1 health 1-drop is mostly pretty bad. And this is a 1 health 1-drop that if they don't kill you, at least just get the resource back. And, in situations where like, you have ways to protect it, cheap ways to generate more resources. This isn't something you like build a deck around, but as just a 1-drop that you can just play, you know, it's if your deck cares about it at all wants a 2/1 drop, this is a fine one to play. That's kind of the point. So I don't think it's an all-star by any means, but I think that being a 1-drop that your opponent feels compelled to remove is a pretty decent place to be. And last but not least, Gold Chernoll. Another handlock card. I was so surprised, by the way, that there wasn't a Hogger in this set. The fact that there's no Hogger in the Stormwind set, when Hogger is such a defining character in the early levels for Alliance players, is so strange. I saw this and I was like, oh, it's Hogger. I'm like, no, it's not. It's Gold Chernoll. It's not a Hogger. So maybe we'll see Hogger in the mini set, but for now, we have Gold Chernoll, which is a 10-cost 5/4 rush, costs 1 less for each card in your hand. Pretty clearly, this is like Walmart Hogger, right? Only really good for handlock, I suspect. I don't really think we'll really see this many other places. Maybe there are other big hand decks that can exist, but the at least right now, the big hand deck looks to be handlock. And this, this is a very reasonable thing. 5/4 rush that you can play, for cheap. Can be very, very cool, very effective. And yeah, removal on a body that can be, it can be a threat or removal is also quite valuable. Yeah, maybe you somehow get a big hand in Evolve Shaman, and boom, evolve this, revolve this. We'll see. But anyway, that's all the cards. That's our last card from United in Stormwind. Overall, I am super excited for this set. There's a ton of awesome, not just new cards, but entirely new archetypes that I feel like are supported by this. Each of the quests obviously has like its entire own direction that it goes, and way that it drives deck building, and the way that the classes and decks play out. And then I feel like there's a lot of support for things that haven't really had that much support in a while. I love the fact that, pirate, mid-range warrior, beast, druid, all these sorts of like under-supported or not supported at all types of archetypes are getting a lot of cool stuff that I think will really increase the amount of diversity that we see across all the classes. I also just really, really love tradable as a mechanic. I feel like it adds a tremendous amount, especially to classes that don't naturally have a lot of card draw, like Priest or Hunter or Paladin. Adding a card like Acidic Swamp Boost to your deck and then drawing it in a matchup where it's bad for those classes can just be crippling. And having access to a way to deal with things that your deck is vulnerable to without running the risk of just kind of having a dead card in your hand in a matchup where it's not applicable really makes those classes sort of quality of life, including tech cards, a lot better. So I love this set. I'm super excited for it, and really looking forward to being able to play it. So let me know what you all think. What are your favorite cards? What are you most looking forward to in United in Stormwind? And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.